My name is Anna, and 43 days ago, I buried the love of my life. The funeral was everything David would have wanted: simple, dignified, surrounded by the farming community he'd spent 15 years building from nothing. Everyone spoke about his legacy, his kindness, his vision for sustainable agriculture that had transformed our small town in rural Wisconsin. But as I stood there in my black dress, listening to story after story about my husband's generosity and dedication, I couldn't shake one nagging thought. There was a part of David's life I had never been allowed to see: the Red Barn. For 15 years of marriage, that barn had been off-limits to me. "It's my workshop, honey," David would say with a smile whenever I asked. "A man needs his space to think and tinker. You understand, right?" And I did understand. Or at least, I thought I did. The silence in our farmhouse was deafening. For 43 days, I'd been putting off the inevitable, going through David's belongings, organizing his affairs, deciding what to keep and what to donate. Our friends and family kept calling, offering to help, but I wasn't ready. How do you sort through a life? How do you decide which memories to box up and which to display? I walked through the house, touching surfaces that still held traces of him: his coffee mug by the sink, his reading glasses on the nightstand, his favorite jacket hanging by the door. But my eyes kept drifting to the window that faced the barn. That damn red barn with its perpetually locked door, and windows too high to peek through. It was a Thursday morning when I finally made up my mind. I'd been avoiding it long enough, using every excuse in the book. But standing in our kitchen, staring at that barn through the morning mist, I realized something. I was afraid. Afraid of what I might find. Afraid of discovering that my husband, my David, had been keeping secrets from me. But fear was no way to live. David was gone, and I needed to move forward. That meant confronting whatever was in that barn. I found the key in David's toolbox, exactly where I'd expected it to be. My hands trembled as I walked across the dewy grass, the key feeling heavier with each step. The lock clicked open with surprising ease, as if it had been waiting for this moment. The barn door creaked as I pushed it open, and what I saw inside made me gasp. This wasn't a workshop. This wasn't a place for tinkering or storing farm equipment. It was an office. A beautiful, meticulously organized office with file cabinets, a large desk, a computer, and walls covered with maps, charts, and photographs. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was the dozens of framed photographs covering one entire wall. Photographs of children. Children I had never seen before. I approached the wall slowly, my heart hammering in my chest. Each photograph showed David with different children. Some looked like school pictures. Others were candid shots of him reading to them, playing games, helping with homework. There were at least 30 different children represented, ranging in age from about 5 to 16, boys and girls of different ethnicities, all smiling genuinely at the camera. At the bottom of each frame was a small placard with a name and dates. Timothy 2018-2019 Sarah, 2019 a 2020. Marcos, 2020 a 2021. The dates went back 15 years. Exactly as long as we'd been married. Who were these children? And why had David never mentioned them? With shaking hands, I opened the first filing cabinet. It was filled with meticulously organized folders, each labeled with a child's name. I pulled out Timothy's folder at random. Inside were school reports, medical records, letters, drawings, and photos. Everything was photocopied. These weren't originals. At the top of the file was a cover sheet with official letterhead: Sunshine Children's Home Foster Care Program. Foster care. David had been involved with foster children for 15 years, and I had no idea. The second filing cabinet contained financial records, bank statements, receipts, invoices, all documenting hundreds of thousands of dollars in transactions, school supplies, medical bills, college tuition payments, car purchases, wedding gifts. David had been financially supporting these children long after they'd left the foster system. The numbers were staggering. We lived modestly, always claiming we needed to save money for the farm, for retirement, for emergencies. But David had secretly been spending a fortune on children I'd never heard of. I sat down heavily in his desk chair, trying to process what I was discovering. David's computer wasn't password protected. When I opened it, the desktop was filled with folders labeled with children's names. I clicked on the most recent one. Ama Menus 2023. The folder contained hundreds of emails between David and a 16-year-old girl. Their correspondence was warm, paternal, filled with advice about school, boys, future plans. David was helping her apply to colleges, offering to pay for her education. She called him dad in her emails. I scrolled through folder after folder, finding similar relationships with dozens of children over the years. They all called him dad. They all trusted him completely, and they all thought they were his only secret. Asterisk, in the bottom drawer of the desk, I found a leather-bound journal. David's handwriting filled page after page, documenting his relationships with these children. The first entry was dated 15 years ago, just 3 months after our wedding. Anna asks why I need this barn space, and I can't tell her the truth. How do you explain to your new wife that you're already a father to a dozen children who aren't biologically yours? How do you tell her that every spare dollar we have goes to kids she's never met? My heart stopped. He'd been doing this since the beginning of our marriage. I kept reading, desperate to understand. Anna and I talked about having children, but when the doctors said it wasn't possible for us, I saw the light dim in her eyes. She tries to hide it, but I know how much it hurts her. How can I tell her that I'm already a father? That I have 37 children who call me dad, who depend on me, who love me. The tears started flowing as I read entry after entry. Emma graduated today, valedictorian. She thanked me in her speech, said I was the father she'd always dreamed of. Anna was at home, sad because our neighbor's baby was born today. If only she knew that her husband watched his daughter graduate just miles away. Entry after entry revealed David's internal struggle. He loved these children desperately, but he also loved me. He was terrified that telling me the truth would destroy our marriage. Anna deserves to be a mother. She would be incredible with these kids. But they're not supposed to be her burden. This is something I started before I met her, and I can't ask her to take on the financial and emotional responsibility of 37 children. I realized I was sobbing as I read about graduation ceremonies I'd never attended, birthday parties I'd never celebrated, Christmases where David had given gifts to children while I sat at home wondering why we could never afford nice things. The most recent entries revealed a crisis I knew nothing about. Timothy called today. He's in trouble, arrested for something he didn't do, needs bail money and a good lawyer. I've already spent most of our savings on Emma's college tuition and Marcus's medical bills. I don't know how to get $50,000 without Anna finding out. $50,000. I checked our bank statements. 3 weeks before David died, he'd taken out a second mortgage on our farm. I'd signed the papers without reading them carefully, trusting him when he said it was for farm improvements. The money was gone, all of it. Transferred to a legal defense fund for Timothy. In another file, I found David's medical records I'd never seen before. He'd been going to a cardiologist for 2 years, diagnosed with severe heart disease. The stress of managing his secret life, the financial strain, the emotional burden of being a father to so many children while hiding it from his wife. It had been literally killing him. His last appointment was 2 days before he died. The doctor had warned him that he needed to reduce stress immediately or face imminent heart failure. David had never told me he was sick, as if summoned by my discovery. The phone in the barn began ringing. I'd never noticed it before, a separate line David had installed without telling me. I hesitated, then answered. David, is that you? Please tell me you're okay. It was a young woman's voice, panicked and desperate. This is Anna, David's wife. Who is this? Silence, then sobbing. You're Anna, oh God. David talked about you all the time. Is David. David passed away 6 weeks ago. I'm sorry, who am I speaking to? This is Emma. David was my dad. Emma found me crying in the barn 3 days after the others had left. You're angry, she said simply. Of course I'm angry. I exploded. Your father lied to me for 15 years. He had an entire life I knew nothing about. Emma sat down beside me. Do you want to know why he never told you? Enlighten me. She pulled out her phone and showed me a video. It was David, recorded just a few months before he died. Emma asked me to make this in case something happened to me. His voice said, from the phone. Anna, if you're watching this, it means you've found my secret, and I'm no longer here to explain. The video continued as I watched my dead husband try to explain his deception. Anna, I started fostering children 3 months after we got married. You were so sad about not being able to have kids, and I thought maybe fostering would help both of us heal. I applied to be a foster parent as a surprise. I held my breath, but when Timothy came to stay with us, angry, broken, needing so much patience and care, I realized I'd made a terrible mistake. You were still grieving the children we couldn't have. You weren't ready to mother someone else's traumatized child. It wouldn't have been fair to you or to him. The video showed David wiping away tears. So I told the agency I'd made a mistake, that my wife wasn't ready. But I couldn't abandon Timothy. I'd promised him a home, and he'd already been rejected by too many families. I arranged for him to be placed with another family, but I stayed in touch. I couldn't just forget about him. One child became 2, then 5, then 20. Each time, I told myself I'd tell you about the next one. But how do you explain to your wife that you're secretly raising children? How do you tell her that the reason you can't afford vacations is because you're paying for summer camps for 12 kids? David's image looked directly into the camera. Anna, you are the love of my life. But these children needed a father, and somehow, I became that for them. I know I should have told you. I know I should have included you. But I was terrified you'd make me choose between you and them. The video ended with David's final words. I chose to lie because I couldn't bear to lose either you or them. I know, that was selfish. I know that was wrong. But Anna, please don't punish them for my mistakes. They're good kids, and they loved me. Maybe you could love them too. After watching the video, my anger transformed into crushing guilt. David had been right. 15 years ago, I wasn't ready to be a mother to traumatized foster children. I was barely holding myself together after learning about our infertility. If he'd brought home a troubled 12-year-old, I would have panicked. But that was 15 years ago. I'd grown since then. I'd healed. If David had trusted me with the truth, maybe we could have been partners in raising these children instead of him carrying the burden alone. Maybe he'd still be alive if the stress hadn't literally broken his heart. The children kept coming to visit. Each one brought stories of David's love and sacrifice. Each one brought grief for the father they'd lost. But they also brought something else: acceptance of me. David talked about you constantly, said Maria, now without 8. He said you were the kindest, most generous woman he'd ever met. He said he fell in love with you because you had such a nurturing heart. Then why didn't he introduce us? I asked. Maria smiled sadly. Because he was terrified you'd think he loved us more than you. He was afraid you'd see us as competition instead of family. With David gone, the financial support these kids depended on had disappeared overnight. Timothy's legal bills were still mounting. Marcus needed continued cancer treatments. Emma's wedding was in 6 months, and David had promised to pay for it. 3 children were currently in college on David's dime. 2 more were supposed to start in the fall. I had a choice: let David's promises die with him, or figure out how to honor his commitments. The farm was already mortgaged to the hilt. Our savings were gone. But these kids had been counting on David, and now they had no one. I called a meeting with all of David's children who could attend. 27 young adults crowded into our farmhouse living room. I need to be honest with you, I said. Your father spent everything we had helping you. The farm is mortgaged, our savings are gone, and I don't have the money to continue supporting everyone the way David did. Faces fell around the room. Emma started crying. But, I continued, I've been thinking about this wrong. David tried to do this alone, and it killed him. We need to do this together. I outlined my plan. Instead of one person supporting 41 children, we'd become a family that supported each other. Timothy had been working as an engineer but had always dreamed of farming. Marcus was a marketing expert. Sarah had accounting experience. Emma was studying business management. What if we turned this farm into a family business? I proposed. David always talked about sustainable agriculture. What if we created something bigger than just a farm? The idea grew as we talked. An organic farm that also served as an educational center. A place where David's children could work together, support each other, and build something lasting in his memory. We'd grow organic produce, host educational tours, teach sustainable farming practices, and create jobs for family members who needed them. Not everyone was on board initially. Some of David's children felt awkward about suddenly having a relationship with his widow. Others were angry that he'd hidden me from them, just as he'd hidden them from me. Jake, now 32, was the most vocal opponent. He was our dad for 15 years, and we never even knew you existed, he said angrily. Why should we trust you now? You could kick us all out tomorrow. I understood his anger. From their perspective, I was the woman who had taken their father's attention away from them. They'd had to share him with a wife they'd never met. You're right to be angry, I told Jake. David should have told us about each other. We all lost years we could have spent as a family. The breakthrough came when I found David's will in the barn. He'd updated it just months before his death. Instead of leaving everything to me, as I'd assumed, he'd left the farm to all of us, me and his 41 children, as equal partners. I, David Patterson, leave my estate to my family, my beloved wife Anna, and my children Timothy, Sarah, Marcus, Emma. The list went on for 2 pages. At the bottom, he'd written a note. Anna, this is my family. I know I should have introduced you sooner. I hope it's not too late to become the family we should have been all along. When I read this to the group, the room fell silent. He left us the farm, Emma whispered. All of us. We're not just David's children anymore, I realized. We're family. We decided to hold a proper memorial service for David, one where all his children could openly mourn the father they'd lost. The service was held at the farm, with over 100 people in attendance. Each of David's children shared a memory, a story about how he'd impacted their lives. I learned things about my husband I'd never known. He'd taught Timothy to drive. He'd walked Emma through her first heartbreak. He'd stayed up all night with Marcus during chemotherapy treatments. For the first time since his death, I felt proud instead of betrayed. David had been an extraordinary father, 2 children who desperately needed one. 6 months after David's death, we officially launched Patterson Family Farms. Timothy moved back to Wisconsin to manage the agricultural operations. Marcus handled marketing from his home in Chicago. Emma delayed her wedding to help with the business launch. We converted the Red Barn, David's secret office, into a welcome center for visitors. The walls still displayed photos of all David's children, but now they were labeled as the Patterson family. Our first educational tour had 30 visitors. Within a year, we were booked solid through the growing season. Emma's wedding was held at the farm the following spring. It was the first time all of David's children had been together in one place. As Emma walked down the aisle between the vegetable gardens, I saw David's spirit in every face around me. His children had found each other, and somehow, I'd found my family too. Emma had asked me to give her away, since David couldn't be there. Are you sure? I'd asked. I know I'm not your real mother, Anna, she'd said. You're the mother who chose to love us after Dad was gone. That makes you more real than genetics. 3 years after discovering David's secret, Patterson Family Farms had become one of the most successful agritourism businesses in Wisconsin. We employed 15 family members and had expanded to include a farm-tateable restaurant, a children's education program, and a foster family support network. The irony wasn't lost on me. David had hidden his children because he was afraid it would destroy our marriage. Instead, his children had given me the family I'd always dreamed of. The most unexpected development came in year 4. Jake, who had been the most resistant to accepting me, called with news. Anna, there's a situation. There are 2 kids in the foster system here, siblings who are about to be separated. Their social worker knows about David's legacy and asked if anyone in our family might be interested in fostering them. I was 53 years old. I'd never planned to become a mother at this stage of life. What are you thinking? I asked Jake. I'm thinking Dad would have said yes in a heartbeat, and I'm thinking these kids deserve the same chance he gave all of us. Meet Sophie and Miguel, ages 8 and 10. Their parents died in a car accident, and they'd been bounced between foster homes for 2 years. They were angry, scared, and convinced that no one would ever really want them. They reminded me of David's description of Timothy all those years ago. Bringing them to the farm was terrifying. I had no experience with children, let alone traumatized ones. But I had something David never had, a whole family to help. Emma taught Sophie to braid her hair. Timothy showed Miguel how to drive the tractor. Marcus took them to their first baseball game. 2 years later, I legally adopted Sophie and Miguel. At ages 55, I finally became a mother, not just to 2 children, but to 40-3. The adoption ceremony was held at the farm, surrounded by all of David's children. Sophie and Miguel were now officially part of the Patterson family, joining a legacy of love that stretched back nearly 2 decades. Do you think Dad would be proud? Emma asked as we watched Sophie and Miguel play with their older siblings. Looked around at the thriving farm, the successful business, the family we'd built from secrets and lies and love. I think, I said, that David would be amazed by what we've accomplished together. 5 years after David's death, I was cleaning out the last of his personal items when I found one final secret, a letter addressed to me, hidden in his desk drawer. My dearest Anna, if you're reading this, it means you've discovered my children, and you've chosen to love them despite my deception. I always knew you would, that's the kind of woman you are. I have one more confession. I was never afraid you'd reject the children. I was afraid you'd love them so much that you'd realize you didn't need me anymore. You see, Anna, you were always meant to be a mother. I knew that from the moment I met you. Every child I fostered, I imagined what they'd be like with you as their mother. Every success they achieved, I wished you could share in the pride. I kept them from you, not because I thought you couldn't handle it, but because I knew you'd be so much better at it than me, and then what would happen to us? I was selfish, my love. I wanted to be both your husband and their father, and I was terrified that combining those roles would mean losing you. Please forgive me, and please know that my greatest dream was always that someday, somehow, you'd become the mother to my children that you were always meant to be. All my love. David. Reading David's final letter, I finally understood the full scope of his sacrifice. He hadn't kept his children from me to hurt me, he'd done it because he loved me so much he was afraid of losing me. His fear had been unfounded. Learning about his children hadn't driven me away from him, it had made me love him more deeply than I ever thought possible. But it had also shown me something else. I was stronger than either of us had realized. Strong enough to build a family from the ruins of secrets. Strong enough to turn betrayal into love. Strong enough to be the mother David always knew I could be. Today, Patterson Family Farms employs over 30 people, most of them David's children, or their spouses. We've fostered 12 more children since Sophie and Miguel, and we've seen 6 more children graduate from college on scholarship funds. We established in David's memory. The Red Barn is now a museum dedicated to foster care. Awareness. Visitors learn about David's story, both the beautiful parts and the complicated ones. We don't hide the truth anymore. The farm hosts an annual foster family picnic, bringing together hundreds of foster children, former foster children, and the families who love them. It's become one of the largest foster family gatherings in the Midwest. Emma and her husband live in the house next to the farm with their 3 children. Timothy and his wife live in town with their twins. Sarah's kids come to work at the farm every summer. I'm a grandmother now to 14 grandchildren, with 2 more on the way. The children call me Grandma Anna, and they know the story of how their families came to be. They know that sometimes love is complicated, sometimes it's hidden, but it always finds a way. Sometimes I stand in that red barn, the barn that started it all, and think about the journey that brought me here. David tried to protect me from his truth, but his truth became my salvation. His secret became my purpose. His children became my greatest joy. I learned that family isn't always about blood or birth certificates or shared genetics. Sometimes family is about showing up when it matters most. Sometimes it's about choosing to love when love seems impossible. David thought he was protecting our marriage by keeping his children secret. In reality, he was protecting his children from losing the only father they'd ever known if I couldn't accept them. He underestimated both of us. Asterisk. 7 years have passed since I opened that barn door and discovered that my husband had been living a double life. 7 years since I learned that the man I thought I knew had been father to 41 children I'd never met. 7 years since my world turned upside down and somehow landed right side up. If someone had told me then that David's deception would lead to my greatest happiness, I would never have believed them, but here I am, surrounded by a family larger than I ever dreamed possible. Running a business built on the foundation of his secret love. The barn that once held David's hidden life now holds our family's future. Wedding receptions, birthday parties, graduation celebrations, all the milestones David once celebrated alone. We now celebrate together. I still miss him every day. I still wonder what our life would have been like if he'd trusted me with his truth from the beginning. But I no longer feel angry about his deception. Instead, I feel grateful. Grateful that his lies led me to love. Grateful that his secrets became my salvation. Grateful that his hidden children became my visible joy. Sometimes the most beautiful families are born from the most complicated truths. And sometimes, the barn you're afraid to enter holds everything you never knew you wanted. Asterisk.